Hello, good afternoon again. Good afternoon. Lovely to see you. Welcome back to those of us who are joining us online. It's great to have you with us. Thank you very much for your company this afternoon, wherever you are joining us from. And for those in the room, thank you for coming back into the room for yet another conversation about the Outlook report. Just before we get into this, I have to say, this is the place where you have the most incredible conversations. So we've been sharing all sorts of different views and opinions on the future of the sector, the challenges and the opportunities. But I have to say, just one moment ago, I found out the most incredible thing. All of my life, having grown up speaking English, I thought the noise a cockerel makes was cock-a-doodle-doo. Okay, so no, apparently if you're German, it's kikeriki. If you're French, it's kokoriko. And if you are Bulgarian, it's kokorigoo. So, and I'm sure there are probably other variations in the room as well. So this is why we bring everyone together. To explain those stories and get those different opinions and perspectives on everything that we are dealing with. But joking aside, let's turn now to the next part of the Outlook report that we need to discuss. Need to bring some experts and people to this stage who are living through the challenges and the issues that we are talking about. So let's turn now to the final area of the Outlook report that we heard about this morning, and that is the environment. The adaptation to climate change, the impact that that is having and that could have, the tools that are there now, and what more is needed to make sure that our farms and this sector is thriving for the future. So I'm looking forward very much to this conversation. Please welcome on stage your moderator to take us through this one, Anna Gumbau.
All right. Thank you very much, Sasha. And I think this is indeed one of the most anticipated sessions here at the EU Agri-Food Days, because the environmental aspects, the increasingly pressing challenges that we are facing in terms of a changing climate are affecting us so much. Indeed, even in the previous session, we had already some questions when it came to the environmental aspects, climate risks. And maybe this is going to be the place where we can get to answer some of these questions. So I'm going to make sure that I give you ample time to ask your questions either via Slido. So if I may have the code with me once more, you can scan it and prepare already from the very beginning any questions that you may have. But also, I will be sure to give you some time to those of you in the floor who want to take the stage, raise your hand, ask a question. So indeed, in this session, we are going to be seeing the part of the agricultural outlook in which we see the sector-wide environmental and climate implications, including land use changes, greenhouse gases, crop diversity, and pesticides. We will be seeing the challenges as well as the opportunities on how do we outline sustainable pathways for future agriculture in the EU that remains within our planetary boundaries. So I will welcome my speakers to sit with me here on stage, and we will welcome our keynote speaker who will introduce the part of the agricultural outlook that refers to these aspects. So let me start by welcoming here on stage the Director for Climate at the Institute for European Environmental Policy, Julia Bognar. Welcome. And please, let's welcome each one of the speakers with a big round of applause. Julia, come on in, sit over here next to me. We also have a farm manager at the European Alliance for Regenerative Agriculture, Felix Rieken. Welcome. And Felix can join me over here. And we also have the chair professor of soil nutrient cycling at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, Anke Herman. Welcome. And Anke can join me over here. And to introduce indeed this section of the agricultural outlook, I'm delighted to be welcoming here on stage the policy analyst at the European Commission's DG Agri, Dangiris Nekrasius. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone here in the room and online. It's an honor to present to you the environmental aspects included in this year's medium-term outlook report. Before I begin, I want to give a special thanks to the colleagues in the Joint Research Center, Maria Bielsa and Franz Weiss, who prepared the analysis and the results, and to my colleague Leon van der Pol, who was going to present you these results today here, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. And last but not least, I want to thank all the interpreters for all your hard work here today. Ačiū labai.
Yep.
So, since 2016, the Outlook report includes environmental chapter, which translates the market outlook into various climate and environmental indicators, or in more recent years, also scenarios. Over the years, it covered indicators like greenhouse gas emissions, ammonia emissions, nutrients, soil erosion. And this year, for the 10th environmental chapter edition, we are expanding the scope and presenting you something new, which is insights on crop diversity and pesticide use. So, greenhouse gas emissions. We have already seen this morning and in the afternoon that direct greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture in the EU are expected to decline by 2035. And that's all across economic farm sizes. These projections are based on acreage, livestock numbers, and production. It does not consider the full implementation of sustainable farming practices supported by CAP or emission reduction technologies. Maybe the panelists can elaborate further on the possible reduction potential of these later in the session. This means that reduction emissions is a conservative estimation, and greater reductions could be achieved. The decline in emissions is largely driven by the changes in the livestock sector. The largest contributor originates from dairy farms, with expected decline of 16% in greenhouse gas emissions, followed by granivores and other grazing livestock, where emissions are expected to decline by respectively 8% and 6%. Next, let's have a look at the changes in land use, as it's good to understand these developments before diving into crop diversity and pesticide use. Over the outlook period, there's only a marginal decline in the overall amount of agriculture and forest land due to land competition between agriculture and different other uses such as urbanization, transport, and energy. However, there are important variations between different types of land uses. For example, arable crop area, here depicted in gray, is projected to decline slightly. Potential impacts of more frequent weather events, water scarcity, and volatility in affordability and availability of inputs are expected to affect the competitiveness of EU arable crops, such as wheat and rye. In addition, lower demand for feed and biofuels do not incentivize extension of arable area. On the other hand, high demand of certain arable crops like oats and oilseeds are expected to affect area expansion positively. Pasture and fodder areas, here depicted in blue and orange, are expected to decline, affected by decreasing numbers of ruminants. These areas are becoming more vulnerable to environmental challenges and to land abandonment, especially in mountainous regions and in southern and eastern European countries, or to conversion to cropland in more productive areas. Lastly, the area of vegetables and permanent crops in yellow is projected to decrease by 7%, affected by climate change-related impacts and higher labor demand. Now, let's look at crop diversity. Crop diversity is important in agriculture with several positive benefits, as, for example, it improves soil health and biodiversity. We analyze crop diversity by using Shannon Diversity Index. This index considers the number of crops present in the region and the evenness of the distribution of crops. It has a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 corresponding to complete monoculture and 10 corresponding to equal share of all available crops and crop groups. Note that we analyzed crop diversity at NUTS2 spatial level to capture changes in crop patterns at regional level, rather than analyzing changes at farm level. This analysis does not consider the full impact of crop rotation and diversification practices supported by the CAP, nor does it include permanent grassland. On the left map, you can see that low values below 4 in lighter yellow colors are found in EU regions where natural conditions favor livestock production, such as Scandinavian countries and the northwestern Iberian Peninsula, whereas higher values in dark brown are found in regions like Poland, Hungary, Croatia. On the right map, you can see that crop diversity is expected to remain relatively stable until 2035. There's only a minor decrease in index across the EU when we look at arable crops and permanent crops together, with most regions registering a change of less than half a point. Most of the changes come from the shift in evenness of distribution of crops, rather than change in the number of crops. Zooming into more specific regions, the index decreases in regions in Greece with expansion of olive groves, through increasing share of temperate grassland in Portugal and Cyprus, or the expansion of fodder maize parts in Eastern Europe. On the other hand, decreases in cereals in, for example, Finland, northeast Spain, and Austria lead to improvement in the Shannon index. However, keep in mind that the results could be rather different if we calculated them at a higher spatial level, for example, at farm level. Now, let's move into the last aspect, pesticide use. In the analysis, we consider 5 different types of pesticide groups and include data and results in quantities of tons of use. It does not include the risk or hazardness of pesticides, nor the implicit modeling of the impact of CAP interventions on pesticide reduction. This means that the results could be underestimated. Based on changes on crop areas, yields, and an assumed trend of increasing pesticide use efficiency, the outlook would result in an overall decrease of 8% in pesticide use by 2035, with a reduction of around 10% for most categories of pesticides. As you can see from the graph on the left, the highest amount of pesticides are applied to vegetables and permanent crops. These are predominantly fungicides and bactericides. High amounts of pesticides per hectare are also applied to other arable crops, which include, among others, potatoes, pulses, and sugar beets. In cereals in particular, herbicides are applied, while lower quantities per hectare are applied also to oilseeds and fodder crops. Among the largest projected changes are vegetables and permanent crops, with decline of 5% in use, covering about a quarter of total pesticide reduction. The overall area of these crops does not change significantly, but the internal crop composition changes, for example, with decreases in vineyards, but increases in olive groves, flowers, and nurseries. Pesticide use in cereals declines by 12%, covering about 40% of total pesticide decrease, while for other arable crops, it declines by 23%. The reductions are driven by both decrease in intensity of pesticide use and the decrease in area. Cereals area decreases by 6%, and area for other arable crops decreases by 17%. Pesticide use intensities are projected to decrease for pulses, sugar beet, but increase for potatoes. Finally, we model regional distribution of pesticide use intensity, and it changes over time for different types of pesticides. So the regional distribution of pesticide use intensities shows high uses of fungicides and bactericides in regions with a high share of vegetables and permanent crops, like the Netherlands, Southeast Spain, Cyprus, and some Italian regions. In the map on the right, you see the changes for use of fungicides and bactericides. Here, the more significant decreases occur in southern France and Italy, while increases are shown in the Netherlands, eastern Spain, Portugal, and Finland. On the other hand, herbicides are distributed more uniformly with high values in northeast Western Europe, linked to high shares of yields of arable crops. Reductions in herbicides use are geographically more widespread, driven by both decreased pesticide use intensities and decrease in arable land, particularly cereals, for example, in regions of France and Germany. With that, I end my presentation and thank you for your attention. I look forward to hearing from panel on different aspects on environmental projections. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dangiris, for giving us this overview on this section of the agricultural outlook, and also for stepping in for Leon, who indeed couldn't join us, unfortunately. So I would like to now turn to the panel, and we've seen a lot of data, a lot of key figures here, and I think a lot of rather striking facts, maybe. What is some idea, what is some point in particular, one key figure that particularly struck you, or one that you would like to highlight? Maybe we can do a first round, starting with Anke, and then all the way to Julia.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me to the EU Agri-Food Days. It's the first time that I'm here. So looking at the report, I find it's quite striking, and it's positive that there will be a decrease in greenhouse gas emission. But then all at the same time this morning, like when we did the word cloud, is like uncertainty. Mm-hmm. So it's really like weather related. If we know the weather, then probably we can really be sure about how greenhouse gas emission will develop or if they will decline. So I think it's good to be positive, but then also my scientific brain is kicking in, well, uncertainty. What I also, and I haven't read the whole report, I only flicked through this part, what I'm missing from the environmental impact is nutrient leaching. So we heard a little bit in the previous session, but it's also like, this is also a part, and it's also really like, okay, maybe we can decrease greenhouse gas emission, but nutrient leaching, if there are nutrients, particular, if nitrogen is in the system at the end of the growing season, it will be leached. So it's like also like to get the holistic view.
Fair point. Thanks, Anke. Felix.
Yeah, also I want to share my gratitude for the invitation to this. Regarding what has been said, I have the look on this pesticide use is decreasing. This is fascinating news. This is amazing news. But I also see just a tiny little trend of decrease. And we have been talking about sustainability in nearly every session here. I think sustainability is not leading us anywhere in a broken system. We have to start to regenerate. And I think we should shift the focus on getting it better again.
Thank you. Thanks, Felix. And Julia.
So I want to touch, I also want to echo the sentiment of thanking for the opportunity for being here today and for being able to speak with you. I want to touch upon two aspects that you mentioned, the uncertainty aspect, and you mentioned fixing what is broken. And so my mind, obviously working for an environmental policy organization, is to jump to the policy options, the policy framework, and how can it address this? So what jumped, my work focus is mainly on climate change mitigation and resilience in agriculture and forestry. And what jumped out to me was the numbers that were given about the expectations for reducing emissions by 2035. And so most of it was expected to come from livestock, and that it was expected because of increasing efficiencies that will help reduce these emissions, which is a positive development that we'll see over the next 10 years. But you're also thinking about towards 2040. There's a target now that's been agreed to by member states to reduce emissions by 90% by 2040, which is substantial. So we start to think about, okay, what sectors need to contribute towards this goal? How can the agri-food sector contribute to this goal? And I think the two policies that come to mind specifically are the Common Agricultural Policy, which has been mentioned a lot today, but one of the forgotten policies that hasn't been talked about a lot today is the Carbon Removal and Carbon Farming Certification Framework. So how can these two policies interact with each other and also facilitate incentives for farmers to reduce their emissions? So I think with the Common Agricultural Policy, we have to think about how is it going to incentivize livestock emission reductions, because in the previous CAP period, there really isn't anything. If studies have shown that there's not really expected emission reductions under the CAP for livestock emissions. For crop emissions, the CRCF, the certification framework that the EU is working on now, has many different possibilities for reducing emissions that is coming from arable farming and for certification of this. But I think that talking about crop diversity as one avenue has many biodiversity benefits. And so under the CRCF, we need to look at how can we align soil health, biodiversity, climate adaptation, and climate mitigation, because the main focus is climate mitigation, but we have to think about an integrated approach with these policies.
Absolutely. Thanks, Julia. And interesting that you're bringing also as well the carbon removal certification perspective. I think something that we can touch upon in the discussion. I would like to stay with you, because especially when we talk about land use changes, these have been traditionally results of competition between different activities, as we know, right? But now it seems that the climate impacts is what they are accelerating or becoming more and more prominent. So how are market demand, the climate impacts, the farm economics in the end shaping land use in the EU today? What are some trajectories that you expect?
So I think again, we're going back to this concept of resilience, which I want to talk about today, but I think that this is an important concept that needs to be further discussed as far as how we integrate this into policy. But what we're seeing right now is not necessarily sudden transformations because of market shocks or climate impact shocks, but we're seeing a gradual rebalancing of production systems that are being driven by climate risks, but also market risks, and also profitability as well. So when you have these interacting forces between market demands and farm economics and climate impacts, they're reinforcing each other to essentially determine what's being produced, where, and how. With market demand signals, there's increasingly shaping how land use is occurring upstream. EU land use is still overwhelmingly shaped by domestic consumption, but somewhat by global demand as well. But we're seeing consumer preferences changing. There's decreasing demand for ruminant products, stronger demand for poultry and plant proteins and pulses. And then land use is also partly responding to international demand and trade agreements as well. But overall, we're seeing a changing balance between feed, food, and non-food crops. So we're having competing demands for farmers. That's not just for food production, but also for carbon farming now that the certification is becoming more of in demand to reduce emissions. There's bioeconomy demands, bioeconomy value chains and opportunities there. And then also production of renewable energy as well. So these are changing the composition of production, but not necessarily the level of production that's occurring. And then it's also shaped by farm economics, where we've heard in the previous session, there's tight economic constraints, there's price volatilities, input cost shocks, and the margins are quite thin. So this limits investments in both resilience and mitigation for farmers, and their access to finance is quite uneven, where large farms may have economies of scale, but smaller farms have less options. As far as climate change impacts go, they're not a future risk, it's happening now. And the impacts are shaping land use decisions now. So we're seeing more droughts, more floods, heat waves, rainfalls. This is affecting yields, timing of planting and harvests, and also the quality of crops. And then you're seeing quite big, large discrepancies in impacts across regions. To just sort of give a larger picture, southern regions are experiencing water stress and heat exposure. Northern regions are facing flooding and prolonged growing seasons, also possible soil erosion. So this is driving changes in their choices that farmers are making, and also land use intensity and what's viable in different locations. So basically, what is happening is that land use is going to become much more risk aware. Farmers are going to prioritize systems that are resilient to both climate and market shocks. And we're going to see increasing diversification where the conditions allow for this. But it's all about, policy should be all about supporting resilience and resilience of farming. And We've heard the word resilience used over and over, and it's a word that I'm going to use as well, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does resilience mean? Because we don't have a clear definition of this. And so really it's about the capacity to anticipate, to be able to absorb shocks and to be robust against shocks, to adapt to these, and then also to transform how you respond to these. So it's basically about enabling recovery, but changing how you produce, and then bouncing forward rather than bouncing back.
Thank you, Julia. And that brings me also to the farmer's perspective. What does resilience mean to you, Felix? And what are the impacts that you're already witnessing? And what are some measures, what are some different matters that you're implementing in your own farm to build this resilience?
Right. It's fascinating to see that mostly all the panelists are aligned with each other about what they're talking about. It's very fascinating. So let me take you a little bit back to 2018, where we suffered a very dry year in northern Germany. It's been not raining from April to October, and in a usually quite humid area, our grass production collapsed completely, and we had to sell 12 animals to the butcher because we couldn't feed them. We were starting our winter fodder in August. One cow died to a heat stroke. Usually I leave out this part, but we had to ask for the government to an aid package to keep the farm. And I raise this to every one of you. Imagine if you have to ask for money. That's not fun. So when I came back to the farm, it started raining, and I went outside to see that it's right next to the trees getting green first. And that was a key element in my pathway towards regeneration. And I found actually building resilience in ecosystems to provide food is quite simple. So you got to stop plowing. We just have to stop tilling the soil to its climax of degradation. We do a few smart things to kickstart regeneration, and then start growing soil and stewarding life. With healthy soil that preserve healthy plants, that nurture healthy animals, and these will make our ecosystems thrive. Imagine how these ecosystems will provide us with healthy food. Weeds and pests and diseases will be less of a problem. I see a future where the health of our ecosystems make every desperate attempt to control nature with synthetic fertilizers and pesticides obsolete. So I see a future where we don't need antibiotics anymore. Well, we keep them just in case. But at the moment, we abuse the possibility to cure a symptom. And rather, we should heal the problem at the root cause. Simultaneously, agrochemical and pharma companies would have to rebuild their business cases, and the farmers can reduce their inputs and gain independence again. This is a business case for the farmers. In organic, this is a little bit different because in many contexts, this stop plowing is not an option. So we see the holy grail of regeneration as organic no-till farming, but in organic we can easily integrate trees. We can implement very interesting grazing methods to start regeneration. And the pioneers phase, I believe, is over. We see all the amazing farmers doing it around and tell us how it works. And we can get a little bit more in the nitty-gritty of that from the 4th to the 6th February, where we host the Regeneration Europe Week in Brussels with the European Alliance of Regenerative Agriculture. And I tell you, I'm not dreaming here. This journey has started already. I'm just here to fasten the process and take away the risk of the farmers.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Felix. Now I'd like to turn to... Yeah, I think that definitely resonated with our audience, Felix. And now I'd like to turn to Anke, because when we talk about our soils, crop diversity is considered to be beneficial for our soil health. And so now if we look into the current weather trends, the water-related challenges, what can we do to support soil functioning, soil health, if you want to call it like that? We had a bit of a discussion around the terminology before, but what are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I would like to react to Felix. Thank you very much for sharing this, because this is the real life, really facing. So I have a former colleague. He left science to become a milk farmer in New Zealand, so going back. And then also, like yesterday, we were discussing the situation of farmers getting depressed. So he got into depression. So it's really like, this is the real world. And I see myself as a soil scientist, and I would like to be a soil ambassador. And it's really like, I would like to scratch now on the surface. So soil is the fundamental resource for all our civilization, including managing in a sustainable way plant and crop productivity and food security. So it's really the fundamental. And quite often we treat it as dirt. Probably it's dirt for you, but it's not for me. And really, like, I keep saying that soil is teeming with life. So in one spoonful of soil, there are as many microorganisms as people on Earth. And they're as diverse as we are. So it's really like, and they do all the important stuff, and how should we treat the soil? And also yesterday, above ground, we said, we should look at a systematic approach. And I think I concur also below ground. Soil is complex, and I don't have a remedy solution. But it's also like what my group, and also I'm leading a larger project in the northern part of Europe, is like looking at crop diversification. Can it be a way forward to establish resilient cropping system? And what I find is like, and it's probably just starting, like looking into different cropping system, using different crops with larger and deeper roots. So we can also like combine crops with larger roots when there is a water shortage. Maybe they can still get some water, etc. So it's also like with the rooting system, the unexplored below ground, we know very little. But then it's also like a good rooting system provides soil structure. It's also input for carbon, and also like carbon sequestration. But then I also would like to mention the challenges ahead, trade-offs. So quite often we say, we should store more carbon. But then if we store more carbon, what will we do? We provide more food for microorganisms. And they will get carbon, they will get energy. And that can also be a trade-off that maybe more N2O emissions are released. So it's also like that trade-off. So one cropping system may be enhancing a certain ecosystem, but also there can be negative. And like the trade-off analysis is also something that we need to take into account. So it is really like, again, if we know the weather, we would be fine. If we know the weather in the next few years, we wouldn't have any problems. But that's the uncertainty.
Sure. Going back to one of the keywords of today. I have a last round of questions for each one of you, which I will need to ask you to be very brief, because we only have about 20 minutes left of discussion. And I want to get questions from the audience. So if I may have the Slido QR code again, and also those of you who are joining us here in the room, in the Charlemagne building, please think of any questions that you might want to ask our panelists. So I will very shortly get back to you, and you can raise your hand. But let's get back to the panelists. And again, I will need to ask you to be brief. But Julia, starting from you, we've seen that there's a projected decline when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. What does the EU need to do to make sure it happens? And what are the measures that you would recommend to do it most effectively?
That's a complicated question with complicated answers. But as I said before, agriculture will need to deliver on emission reductions. And it's going to differ from other sectors, not necessarily in the level of ambition that's going to be needed, but the way that policies need to be designed and implemented. So we're going to need many key enabling factors to be addressed within policies. And I want to emphasize it's not just going to be one policy fix, one policy to rule them all that's going to be able to incentivize emission reductions, but it's going to take a whole framework of policies that are integrated and working together in a coherent and meaningful way. But some of these key enablers that need to be addressed within these policy framework for climate mitigation in agriculture, it needs to rely on knowledge and advisory services that are available to farmers all across the EU. Right now, we have really uneven access to such services. In many member states, they rely on private advisory services, and sometimes it's very high level and accessible, like in countries like Denmark, and in other member states, it's not very accessible. So we need to start building stronger public governance of advisory services, and we need to be able to build trust with farmers with this too. We need predictable financing. This is key. You're going to need a combination of public and private financing, and you're going to need to incentivize private financing through public policies as well. So we're going to need long-term policy certainty, which was mentioned early in other sessions today. And we're going to need innovative policy instruments to encourage financing as well. So one of the potential policy instruments that we're discussing with the Commission right now is having a potential procurement system for the carbon removal and certification framework, where they would make purchases of CRCF units that gives farmers long-term certainty that they will have a steady stream of income over a long-term period. We're going to need strong monitoring, reporting, and verification systems because emissions from agriculture are very difficult to measure. There's fragmented calculators, and there's reporting systems with high transaction costs, and farmers often have to report data multiple times to multiple different sources. So we need to be able to allow farmers to have less administrative burdens, report data once, and treat this monitoring and reporting it as a public good. We need to address carbon leakage. It was mentioned earlier that there are risks of increasing imports coming into the EU if we have stronger requirements for farmers to reduce their emissions. So there needs to be addressing demand-side measures, sustainability labeling, as we mentioned, and food waste reduction. But overall, we need to have these particular conditions to make a policy framework work to reduce emissions.
Thank you, Julia. And I gave you a big challenge indeed to outline the different puzzles, the puzzle of different measures that can be done. I'm sure DG Agri is taking good note on these ideas. Now, I would like to bring in the question of circularity as well, and the reuse of our resources to maximize efficiency. Anke, what are the possibilities at the moment for different residues to be removed and to be able to be reused, such as fertilizers, for example? Could you talk to us a little bit about these applications? And indeed, how at the end of the day we maximize our efficiency in order to also minimize our environmental impacts?
I mean, biofertilizer, I think we should really look into them more specifically. And so, for example, animal manure is like, we have livestock producing animal manure, and how to use that. So it's also quite often used animal manure for biogas, and then we have digested products. It's a waste product, but then that can also be used as biofertilizer. And the challenges there, what I see is like there are 4 challenges. It's the quality of the biofertilizer and also the consistency in nutrient levels. It's quite variable. So it's also like to know quality-wise that there are no contamination. So for example, that the risk of heavy metals and pathogens are low. So that's the second point. But then also logistic and scale. So for example, in Sweden where I work, so there we have livestock in the southern part of Sweden, but then crop production is in other parts of the country. How to get biofertilizer from A to B, and then also like acceptance of the farmers. I mean, it's really a good value, and it's also what I would like to say. We will also talk a lot about value change. I see soils as the starting point of the value change, but at the same time also at the end point receiving organic fertilizer from waste products, composition, composting, and farmyard manures. It's the whole cycle, starting from soil, but also ending the loop. So with that, there's so much more to discuss, and we have a lot of organic fertilizers that are underused, and we should embrace them.
And Felix, how do you implement circularity measures or circular resource management in your farm, and which benefits do you see also from the, not only from the environmental, but also from the economic side?
Right. Thanks for passing this over to me, because I can rephrase that really nicely with grazing. So if you put animals in barns, yeah, you have to harvest stuff to feed them. You have to conserve everything to feed it every day. The feeding itself takes fossil fuels and labor. And then you have to bring out the fertilizers from the barn, which is in the barn waste. This is very labor intensive, very fossil fuel intensive, and, well, overall fascinating that we actually got here talking about that. If we get the animals outside, manure becomes nutrients instead of waste. And nature is circular by design. So in nature, there is no such thing as waste. That's very interesting to me. And for the farmers, it means lower costs, higher profits, independence. We have more complex systems that actually become more resilient just by that. To come again to this point that I raised earlier today, where we see this industrialized dairy system globally, I don't see the ships of manure going back to South America, where we get our soybeans from. So on the farm of my parents that I take over now, we also have this local circularity with feeding our community just directly around the farm. We have a little farm shop, we have our own creamery where we produce our products, and I tell you, it is for me the biggest motivation to hand someone our liter of milk, see the sparkling in the eye because they know it's fantastic. It tastes, it nurtures. We also have this farmer-consumer relationship where we can actually educate and build consciousness for food and what it means to produce a liter of milk. I think this is very interesting to get into the idea of how circularity also on a social level could look like, and then how to implement this. So basically we need an outcome-based subsidy system, I would say. This is what we demand from IARA or ask to implement. So instead of subsidizing methods like we used to do with the second pillar, we could measure outcomes like photosynthesis and soil cover for regeneration, for circularity. We could evaluate the productivity and efficiency to get an insight about the resource management and pay the farmers for doing a good job. And then we let the farmers decide which practices they want to implement to regenerate their land. And in the end, we know what's best for the land, like we farmers know better. This is at least what 80 pioneering farmers from Europe say should be done.
Thank you, Felix, also for sharing the testimony. I could see also the brightness in your eyes when you were talking about your relations with your customers. So I will start by taking one question from Slido, and then I will pick 2-3 questions from the floor, because I see a nice question that came from Slido, and is the most voted one, which is, in your opinion, will it be possible to achieve our environmental and climate goals without a serious shift in diets and related demand-side policies?
You want to give this to me, don't you? The answer is complicated if you're talking about the medium term, but in the long term, No. If we're talking about between now and 2040, the Commission's impact assessment looked at different scenarios. It's possible to meet their goals by 2040 through technology options, technology mitigation options on farm to reduce emissions, but there was another scenario where they looked at dietary changes and it offered a bit more flexibility for meeting the climate goals for 2040. So it's an option to consider these demand-side type of incentives for the 2040 target. For 2050, all pathways involve changes in shifts in consumption. And so we'll have to consider at the policy level what kinds of instruments could facilitate this change.
Thank you, Julia.
Well,
Anke.
yeah, I would also like,
Yeah.
yesterday it was mentioned like the social innovation, like bringing that back. So we are all human beings, we have a responsibility. And I mean, it can be diet change, it can also be how we consume and what we eat. So it's really like, that everyone should think, what can I do? So it's not like rely simply on technology, but also like social innovation. Just to get that again onto the board.
I want to see a shift from ultra-processed food to actually food again. So we nurture our bodies and become healthy as society. That's all I have to say on that, I think.
Fair. Then maybe I can pick up on this other question that's popping up right now, which I think you'll be the best position to answer. Is regenerative agriculture viable and feasible in general in the EU, or is it highly dependent on local conditions and cannot be considered a fix-all solution? What would you say?
I would say it's definitely feasible for every region. Wherever you farm, you can integrate principles and practices of regeneration, depending on your context of farm type, personality, soil type, whatever. The context is key over here. But I guess with the right knowledge, that is an issue, and maybe a little bit of courage. I think and what we need is to take away the risk of the farmers to actually change their principle or their practices. And we are thinking of insurances that provide for the farmer, like in a 3 years time, we say, whatever happens on your farm, we pay you what you need to stay on track. And if the regeneration kickstarts right away, then you're going to be fine anyway. If you need a little bit of help because here and there you still have to be a pioneer and do little mistakes that just happen. I did many mistakes on the way. Then we can lift you up again and keep you on track. So no farmers is left behind, but we need to change everywhere, and that's possible.
Thank you.
I'm certain.
I think Anke wanted to react very briefly so that then I can pick up some
questions. It is very briefly, it's more like towards the EU Commission. I would like to see a compilation of success stories for regenerative agriculture, because we were also talking yesterday, it's context specific. When does it work, and really to compile so that we have it bundled together, and not that every individual researcher or farmer has to look into the internet. So that's what I was like just thinking, compilation of success stories.
Right. There's a very nice organization called Top 50 Farmers. They have like a award for 50 farmers in Europe every year. That are amazing success stories. And then have a look at IARA's farmer members. They are happy to share.
Thank you very much. So we have a question over here. Remember to introduce yourself, be short, and make it a question. Thank you.
Mihailov, Romania. Thank you very much for your last statement. It's so close to what I intend to say. We activate in innovation. And together with the Academy of Agriculture and Forestry Science and several research stations, we have led Romania's most advanced non-chemical biophysical program, showing promising results in drought tolerance, reduced input, and overall farm stability. This is a type of scalable, environmentally aligned innovation Europe can build upon. And my question is,
Thank you.
how can we link innovation with environmental mechanism of financing in order to replicate our research along on the whole Europe
Love it.
in
Good
various
question.
farms? Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Any other questions from the floor that I could take now already? If I don't see, if there's someone I'm not seeing, please wave over here. I don't think so. All right, then we have one over here. Thank you. Give it a second. We cannot hear you yet, sorry.
Hello, my name is Javier Montellano from NB Soil Mission Project. And my question is a little bit blunt. Like, do you actually believe that on the midterm we can have coexistence between agriculture, is it practiced now, like conventional, and these other forms or more regenerative agriculture? Do you think there will be like a middle way that will become a standard? What would be your opinion on that? Or is
Thank
it
you.
some practices and some inputs need to completely disappear from the map, like for example coal in energy as an example?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Javier. So innovation and to which extent our current model can still coexist. So do we do a round of reactions maybe? You want to get us started, Julia?
Sure, I'll get started. Yeah, so this is actually something that's discussed very much at the EU policy level, is that there's a gap between the research pipeline to policy pipeline, and obviously there's a link there between the research pipeline to policy to financing as well. So there's a real gap, and so I think that we're trying to think about ways where we can democratize research, that it can make it more accessible to both policymakers and to end users, and then this way that hopefully the financing can follow. So I think that, yeah, more, like you said, more education is needed here and more understanding, but I think how innovation is communicated is going to be a very important part of the next few decades as far as adopting new types of innovative technologies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, also to that question, there is a very interesting cooperation called EIP Agri, where we have projects that combine farmers, researchers, and the value chain, put them in one project and develop innovation. That's very fascinating to me about the outcomes on that. And to your question, I see definitely different practices like coal, for example, to vanish completely, stop degrading our planet. And then in terms of different practices in farming, we need to find a measurement that is possible to show regeneration everywhere. So at the moment, we published a study where we looked via satellite on the farms, on the ecosystems, to measure photosynthesis and soil cover. And then we asked the farmers about their data, which imports they need to gain this photosynthesis, so fuel or the fertilizers, the feed for their animals, whatever they put into their system. And then we ask for the outcomes, so all the produce they make from the farm. And then we can say about their effectivity, about their productivity of their farm practices and their ecosystems. And in the end, within a paleoclimatic region, we compare different farmers to each other and say, all right, these are obviously on the regenerative track for 10 years now because it's amazing what happens over there. in terms of photosynthesis and soil cover and outcomes with less inputs. We have a middle ground where the farmers started the regeneration, still have to learn a little bit, and then we have a basis where the farmers haven't heard about it yet.
Thank you.
And then we can implement a CIP that honors actual regeneration. And if we want to kickstart, this is going to be a cap that is fit for purpose. So we need the transition scheme to be ring-fenced, so it's guaranteed. We need to tie it to the sustainability compass. Maybe we call it regenerational compass then. And then we set clear rules so the money gets to the farmers instead of anything before or after the value chain.
Thank you. Thanks, Felix. And Anke?
Yeah, it's also like linking research and innovation to policy, to adaptation to on the farm. It's really, like Julia said, it's a quite breach between research and then policy. And it also takes time. So currently, I'm coordinating a program in the northern part of Europe. It's a 4-year program, and we're looking at innovative new cropping system. And it's pure, to start off with, looking at understanding research, innovation. And then we should also do policy. So it's also like there will be outcomes coming later on, and also to be content that it will take time. So I'm trying not to ask for more funding and longer project, but I still now do it. But it's also like if we have a 3-year project or 4-year project, it's quite limited. But what I would like to see is also like to look at similar cropping system throughout Europe, because some systems are better adjusted to the southern part of Europe, some are better for northern or mid-Europe. So it's really like, it's not, unfortunately not that there's no golden answer, how to do that. And also like what kind of, is it conventional farming, regenerative farming, is it sustainable intensification? It's also like, it's easy to give some labels to different cropping systems. And then I also try to go back, what is actually successful? And then trying also to, of course we would like to have a label, but then also like to think, okay, what is good for the environment? And for me personally, and that's my personal opinion, it doesn't matter if it's conventional, organic farming, regenerative, but we should really look at sustainable pathways and thinking not in boxes.
Thank you. We have 1 minute left, so does anybody have any final reaction, final message to the audience?
I can go. Can I? Sure. So, yeah. So I just want to emphasize the earlier message that like I said, there's not going to be any one policy that fixed all. It's not going to be the CAP by itself. It's not going to be the CRCF by itself. It's not going to be the effort sharing regulation, LULUCF. It's going to be everything in consultation. We're going to need the right policy mix, and we're going to need to establish long-term certainty for farmers, and it's going to need to be coherent and reinforcing with each other. So I just wanted to emphasize that the conversation has to focus on many policies.
Thank you, Julia. That's the thing. I mean, there's so many policies that we could be discussing, and we only had 1 hour for it. So I think we rose to the challenge. Of course, there's so much more that we could have discussed, but I'm sure that this is only the start of the conversation. So thank you very much to all of you for having shared your different perspectives. Also, Felix, for sharing us your testimony as well. We had some questions from smallholder farmers who I'm sure would be keen to also speak with you and get your advice and inspiration. So can I have a big round of applause for my panelists?